The sky turned green at 4:47 in the afternoon. Mabel Thornton dropped her coffee mug. It shattered against the porch floor, brown liquid, splashing across weathered wood, but she didn't look down. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on that color spreading across the Oklahoma horizon like a bruise forming on the face of God. She knew that green. It had killed her husband. 22 years ago, that same sickly color had painted the sky moments before an EF5 tornado touched down 3 miles from this very spot. Robert had thrown her into the cellar. He'd pushed her down those concrete steps with hands that had held her for 30 years of marriage. And then he'd turned back to close the doors. The tornado took him before he could get down the stairs. Mabel had listened to her husband die. She'd heard the roar of the wind swallow his scream. She'd felt the door buckle inward, straining against forces no human structure was meant to withstand. And when silence finally came, when she climbed those steps and pushed open those doors, Robert was gone. Not dead. Gone. The tornado had carried him away like he weighed nothing at all. They found his body 2 miles east, tangled in the branches of an oak tree that had stood for 100 years before that day. Now that green was back. The emergency siren started screaming. Mabel counted the seconds between each wail. 22 years of living alone had taught her to count everything. Seconds until danger arrived. Dollars until the bank account ran dry. Days without hearing another human voice. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look at it. EF4, Creek County, seek shelter immediately. Mabel was 67 years old. She weighed 120 pounds. She'd spent 35 years as an emergency room nurse at Creek County General before the medical bills from Robert's funeral and Caleb's death had taken everything. She'd seen trauma that would break most people. She'd held dying children in her arms. She'd told mothers their sons weren't coming home. Nothing scared her anymore. Nothing except that green sky. The wind hit 50 miles per hour. Her gray hair whipped across her face, stinging her eyes. The old farmhouse groaned behind her boards, creaking like the bones of an old man struggling to stand. That's when she saw the headlights. Dozens of them, cutting through the rain on Route 44 like a snake made of fire. Moving fast, but not fast enough. The wind was shoving them sideways, threatening to dump them into ditches filled with rising water. Motorcycles. Mabel squinted through the rain. Even at this distance, even through the chaos of the approaching storm, she could see them struggling. One bike wobbled dangerously, nearly going down before the rider corrected. Another pulled off the road, the rider's boots hitting mud as he fought to keep his machine upright. They were looking for shelter. There was no shelter out here. Just Mabel's farm and 60 acres of nothing. The nearest town was 12 miles east, and the tornado was coming from the west. These riders had maybe 4 minutes before that monster reached Route 44. 4 minutes to find cover or die. The first bike slid into her driveway. The rider was huge black leather jacket, dark with rain, face hidden behind a soaked bandana. He killed the engine and looked around, searching for something, anything that might save his life. More bikes followed. 10, 20, 40. Mabel's stomach dropped. She could see their patches now. The death's head grinning from leather vests. The letters stitched in red and white that made police officers reach for their weapons, and ordinary citizens cross to the other side of the street. Hell's Angels. Every instinct screamed at her to run, lock the door, hide in the cellar, wait for the storm to pass, and pray these men moved on. A bike went down. A bike went. The rider hit the asphalt hard, his machine sliding out from under him in a shower of sparks. 2 men jumped off their bikes and ran to him, grabbing his arms, pulling him up. But something was wrong. His arm was hanging at an angle. Arms don't hang. Bone wrong. Brake wrong. Behind them, the funnel dropped from the clouds. Mabel had seen tornadoes before. She'd survived 3 of them in her 67 years on this Oklahoma farm. But this one was different. This one was a monster. A churning column of destruction that stretched from the green sky to the brown earth, like the finger of an angry God reaching down to smite the sinners below. 2 miles out, maybe less. 4 minutes had become 2. Mabel was off the porch before she knew she was moving. Her boots hit mud. Rain slashed at her face. The wind tried to push her back, tried to keep her safe on that porch where she belonged. But Mabel Thornton had stopped being safe 22 years ago when she watched that oak tree become her husband's grave. She ran toward the bikers, toward the Hell's Angels. towards 79 of America's most feared outlaws standing in her driveway while an EF4 tornado bore down on them all. The lead rider turned toward her. Through his rain-splattered visor, she could see confusion, disbelief, an old woman in a floral dress soaked to the bone, sprinting across her own property toward a gang of Hell's Angels in the middle of the apocalypse. She must have looked insane. She didn't care. "There's a cellar," she shouted over the wind. "Under my barn, reinforced concrete. It survived 2 tornadoes. You'll live if you get down there now." The rider lifted his visor, gray beard streaked with rain, blue eyes cold as river stones in January, a face that had seen violence and caused violence and made no apologies for either. "Lady, do you know who we are?" Mabel stopped 2 feet in front of him. The wind howled around them, the rain came down in sheets, and somewhere behind her the tornado roared like a freight train running off its tracks. "I know you're about to be dead if you don't move your ass. That tornado is 2 miles out and closing fast. It doesn't give a damn about your patches or your reputation or whatever the hell you think makes you scary. Move." Now, the man stared at her. 1 second, 2, 3. Then something changed in those cold blue eyes. Something that might have been respect. Something that might have been recognition of a strength he hadn't expected to find in a 67-year-old woman standing in the rain. "You heard her," his voice boomed across the driveway, cutting through wind and rain and fear. "Off the bikes. Follow her. Go, go, go." 79 men abandoned their machine. 79 Hells Angels left their motorcycles in the mud and the rain and followed an old woman in a floral dress toward a barn that was shaking so hard it looked like it might collapse before the tornado even arrived. Mabel ran, her lungs burned, her legs ached. She was 67 years old and she hadn't run like this in decades. But she kept going, because behind her 79 men were trusting her with their lives. Behind her 79 men who had probably never trusted anyone outside their brotherhood were following a stranger into the dark. The barn doors were stuck. Rusted hinges, warped wood. 22 years of neglect had sealed them tighter than any lock. "Move." A biker shoulder-checked her aside, not roughly, just efficiently. He grabbed the handle with both hands. 2 more joined him, 3 massive men in leather vests, muscles straining against rain-soaked fabric. They pulled together. The steel screamed. The doors gave way. Inside, the cellar entrance gaped like a wound in the earth, concrete steps leading down into darkness. The same steps Robert had pushed her down 22 years ago. The same darkness that had saved her life while her husband died above. Down, Mabel shouted. "Everyone down. Single file. Move." She positioned herself at the entrance, counting heads as they poured past her. 10, 20, 30. The injured man was being carried by 2 brothers. His face was gray shock setting in. His arm flopped uselessly at his side bone, visible through torn skin. 40, 50, 60. The wind was a living thing now. It grabbed at Mabel's dress, trying to drag her away from the cellar entrance, trying to carry her off like it had carried Robert. But she planted her feet and kept counting. 70, 75. "That's everyone," the leader shouted. He was the last one still above ground besides Mabel. "Get in." She looked back. The tornado was a mile away, maybe less. A black wall eating the world. Trees were disappearing into it. Cars were disappearing into it. A barn on the neighboring property was disappearing into it, wood and metal, and decades of memories sucked up into that churning darkness. The sound was beyond description. Not wind, not thunder, something older, something primal, something that made every animal instinct in Mabel's body scream at her to run, hide, survive. She dove down the stairs. The leader followed. He grabbed the cellar doors and pulled them shut behind him, muscles bulging, veins standing out on his neck as he fought against wind that was trying to tear those doors off their hinges. Clang, darkness, silence. For one heartbeat, everything was still. Then the monster arrived. The sound hit first, a roar so loud it seemed to bypass Mabel's ears and vibrate directly in her chest. The concrete wall shook. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. The single bare bulb that lit the cellar flickered, died, flickered again. Someone was praying. Someone was crying. A big man in the corner had his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth like a child trying to escape a nightmare. Mabel clicked on her flashlight. 79 faces emerged from the shadows. Tattooed, bearded, hard. Faces that had stared down police officers and rival gangs and men who wanted them dead. Faces that showed no fear in bar fights and shootouts and high-speed chases down midnight highways. But their eyes were the eyes of men who knew they might die tonight. Everyone listen. Mabel's voice cut through the chaos, through the roaring wind and the creaking concrete and the prayers in the sun. 78 heads turned toward her. This cellar survived two tornadoes, 1987 and 2003. Both of them were stronger than the one passing over us right now. These walls are 18 inches of reinforced concrete. The doors are steel-plated. We are going to be fine. A young biker near the back laughed nervously. He couldn't have been more than 22. How do you know it's weaker than those other ones? Because I'm still alive to tell you about them, and I was standing right here both times. Mabel swept her flashlight across the crowd. Now anyone injured besides the man with the broken arm, silence. Good. She moved through the crowd, shouldering past leather vests and rain-soaked bodies until she reached the injured man. He was propped against the wall, face-white lips pressed together against pain he was trying not to show. Name Mabel crouched beside him. What your name? Your real one. The man blinked through the pain. Garrett. Garrett Howe. Okay, Garrett. I was an ER nurse for 35 years. I'm going to set this arm. It's going to hurt like hell. You need something to bite down on. The leader appeared beside her. He pulled a leather wallet from his vest and handed it to Garrett. Thanks, Stone. Garrett shoved the wallet between his teeth. Stone. So that was the leader's name, or at least what his brothers called him. Mabel filed the information away and turned her attention to Garrett's arm. The break was bad. Compound fracture of both the radius and ulna. Bone fragments visible through torn skin. In a hospital, this would require surgery pins, months of physical therapy. Here in a cellar with a tornado screaming overhead, Mabel had her hands and 35 years of experience. It would have to be enough. On three, she said. 1. She pulled. Garrett screamed into the leather. His whole body convulsed. 2 bikers grabbed his shoulders, holding him still while Mabel worked. She could feel the bones shifting under her fingers, grinding against each other as she manipulated them back into something resembling their proper position. The sound was horrible. The sensation was worse. But Mabel had done this before. Not often, not happily. But when ambulances were backed up and patients were dying and there was no time to wait for surgeons, she had done what needed to be done. Done. She released Garrett's arm and reached for her emergency kit. 22 years of tornado country had taught her to keep supplies in the cellar. Bandages, antiseptic, a splint made from wooden slats and medical tape. She worked quickly, cleaning the wound, applying antibiotic ointment, wrapping the arm tight enough to immobilize it but not tight enough to cut off circulation. You'll need surgery, she said when she finished. But you'll keep the arm. Don't move it, don't use it, and get to a hospital as soon as this storm passes. Garrett nodded weakly. The wallet fell from his teeth. His head lolled back against the concrete wall as shock and exhaustion pulled him toward unconsciousness. Someone watch him, Mabel ordered. If he stops responding, you yell for me. She moved to the young biker who was hyperventilating in the corner, the one who couldn't have been more than 22. Up close, she could see the terror in his eyes, the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the trembling in his hands. Name, she said softly. D. Dustin. Dustin Brennan. Okay, Dustin, I need you to look at me. Not the ceiling, not the walls, me. His eyes found hers, wide, panicked, lost. Breathe with me. Mabel took his hand and placed it on her chest over her heart. Feel that, feel how slow and steady that is. Match it in through your nose, out through your mouth. I can't. I'm going to die. We're all going to die. No, we're not. We're going to sit here together, you and me, and we're going to breathe. And when that tornado passes, we're going to walk out of this cellar and see the sun. Do you believe me? Dustin shook his head. That's okay. Mabel squeezed his hand. You don't have to believe me. You just have to breathe. Can you do that? Can you breathe with me? Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Dustin's breathing began to even out. His grip on Mabel's hand tightened, then relaxed. The wild terror in his eyes faded to something more manageable. Still afraid, but no longer drowning in it. Thank you, he whispered. That's what we do, Mabel said. She patted his shoulder and stood up. We take care of each other. She moved through the cellar, blankets for the ones who were shaking, water for the ones who needed it, words for the ones who were falling apart. 79 men and not one of them questioned her authority. Not one of them challenged her commands. In this concrete box beneath the earth, with death roaring overhead, Mabel Thornton was in charge. Stone watched her from across the cellar. She could feel his eyes following her as she worked, calculating, assessing, seeing something that surprised him. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Survived a tornado, Mabel sat down on an overturned crate, her back against the cold concrete wall, or taking care of people who are scared out of their minds, both. 35 years in the ER. She accepted the bottle of water someone handed her. You see enough trauma, you learn how to stay calm when everything's falling apart. Panic kills more people than the injuries themselves. My job was always to be the calm in the storm. Stone was quiet for a moment. Above them, the tornado continued its assault. The cellar doors buckled inward, with each gust straining against hinges that were never designed for this kind of abuse. Why'd you quit? My husband died. Mabel's voice was flat. No emotion. Just facts. Medical bills took everything. I couldn't afford to live in town anymore. Couldn't afford to keep working, either not with the commute and the gas prices and the cost of just existing. So I moved out here. Took the only thing I had left. She gestured at the cellar walls surrounding them. This place. Stone nodded slowly. He had questions. She could see them forming behind those cold blue eyes. But he kept them to himself, respecting her privacy in a way she hadn't expected from a man who led an outlaw motorcycle gang. Can I ask you something, he said instead. You just did. He almost smiled. Almost. Why did you help us the truth? Mabel stared at the concrete floor. She could feel the vibrations through her bones. The tornado was directly overhead now. Maximum danger, maximum destruction. If these walls were going to fail, they would fail in the next 60 seconds. Because I watched my husband die trying to save me. The words came out quiet, barely audible over the roaring wind. But Stone heard them. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A softening, a recognition of shared pain. He threw me in this cellar, Mabel continued, pushed me down those stairs and turned back to close the doors. The tornado took him before he could get down the steps. I spent 22 years asking myself what I could have done differently. 22 years of regret eating me alive. She looked at Stone. Those cold blue eyes didn't seem so cold anymore. Tonight I saw you and your men out there, struggling, dying, and I thought I have a cellar. I can save them. If I lock my door and hide, if I let 79 men die when I could have helped. I become the person who let fear win. I become the person Robert died protecting. Most people would have locked that door, Stone said quietly. I'm not most people. No, his voice was soft now, almost gentle. You're not. The silence came like a switch being flipped. One moment the world was ending, the next nothing. No wind, no roar, no shaking walls or buckling doors. Just the sound of 79 men breathing in the dark. Mabel stood up slowly. Her joints ached. Her muscles screamed. She was 67 years old and she just sprinted across a muddy field and treated a compound fracture and talked a panicking young man through what might have been his first brush with mortality. She was exhausted, but the tornado had passed. Stay here, she said to no one in particular. I'll check outside. Like hell, Stone rose to join her. We go together. They climbed the stairs together. Stone put his shoulder to the doors and pushed. They groaned, resisted. 22 years of rust and warped wood fought against his strength. Then they gave way. Dawn was breaking. Mabel stepped out of the cellar and felt her heart stop. Her farmhouse was gone. Not damaged, not destroyed, erased. The foundation was there, covered in debris, but the walls, the roof, the furniture, the memories 40 years of her life had been reduced to scattered wreckage spread across what used to be her front yard. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was seeing. The barn was half collapsed. The fence that had marked the property line for 3 generations was simply gone. The oak tree where Robert had proposed to her 50 years ago was snapped in half, its ancient trunk splintered like a broken bone. Everything she had was gone. Everything except the cellar. Everything except the land itself. Her legs gave out. Stone caught her before she hit the ground. His arms were strong, steadying her with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man his size. Easy. I've got you. My house. Her voice cracked, broke, shattered like the windows that no longer existed. Everything I own, everything I have, gone. She pulled away from him, stumbled toward the wreckage. Her boots crunched on broken glass, splintered wood, shattered memories. There, a photograph. Water damaged but visible, bent but not destroyed. She fell to her knees and picked it up with trembling hands. Robert and Caleb, 30 years ago. Her husband with his arm around their son. Both of them smiling at the camera, both of them alive, both of them looking at her with love in their eyes. My son. She clutched the photograph to her chest. This is all I have left of my son. Stone approached slowly. His boots made no sound on the debris-covered ground, but Mabel could feel him behind her. A presence, a witness to her grief. What happened to him in Afghanistan? 20 years ago. I'm sorry, he was a good boy. Mabel traced Caleb's face with her finger. Handsome, smiling, frozen forever at 25 years old. All he ever wanted to do was protect people. That's why he enlisted. That's why he... She stopped. Because Stone was staring at the photograph, his face had gone pale. What? Mabel asked. Nothing. Don't lie to me. What is it? Stone's jaw tightened. He looked away, looked back at the photograph, looked at Mabel's face, searching for something she didn't understand. It's nothing, he said. He looks familiar, that's all. Familiar how? I don't know. Forget it. But Mabel saw something in his eyes, recognition, shock, something he was trying very hard to hide. You knew him, she said. Stone flinched. You knew my son. The denial was already forming on his lips. She could see it, could see him preparing to lie, to deflect, to protect whatever secret he was keeping. But he didn't. He stood there rain-soaked and wind-battered, surrounded by the ruins of her life, and he told her the truth. I can't be sure, he said slowly. I need to make some calls. I need to verify some things before I say anything. Verify what's sure of what. Stone met her eyes, and for the first time those cold blue eyes held something warm, something almost like compassion. Mabel, if I'm right about this, you deserve to hear the full story. Not pieces, not guesses, the truth complete and verified. What truth? What are you talking about? He didn't answer. What truth, Stone? Give me 5 days. His voice was firm, not unkind, but not yielding either. I need to make some calls, talk to some people, find out if what I think I know is actually what happened. What do you think you know? 5 days, Mabel? That's all I'm asking. 5 days and I'll come back. I'll tell you everything. Why can't you tell me now? Because if I'm right, it changes everything, Stone's voice dropped. And you've already lost enough today. You deserve to hear this properly. Mabel wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to grab this man by his leather vest and shake the truth out of him. But she was tired, so tired. Her house was gone. Her possessions were scattered across 60 acres of Oklahoma farmland. Her body ached. Her heart ached. And now this stranger, this Hell's Angel she'd saved from a tornado, was telling her there was something about her dead son she didn't know. It was too much. 5 days, she said finally. 5 days, Stone confirmed. Then I'll be back, and I'll tell you everything. He reached into his vest and pulled out a card, just a phone number. No name, no address. If you need anything before then, he said, anything at all, you call this number. Mabel took the card. Her fingers brushed against his and she felt calluses, scars, the hands of a man who had worked hard and fought harder. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because you saved 79 of my brothers tonight, Stone said simply. And because maybe I owe you more than that. He didn't explain what he meant. He just turned and walked back toward the cellar where 78 men were beginning to emerge into the gray light of morning. They looked around at the destruction, at the missing farmhouse, at the scattered debris and the broken trees and the old woman kneeling in the mud with a photograph clutched to her chest. Mount up, Stone called out. Those whose bikes survived double up the rest. We're heading out. The bikers moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they had retrieved their motorcycles from the driveway. Some were damaged, but most had survived the tornado's passage. The machines roared to life one by one, engines splitting the morning silence. Stone was the last to leave. He mounted his bike, a massive black Harley that gleamed even through the mud and rain. He looked back at Mabel, still kneeling in the ruins of her home. 5 days, he said. Then he kicked the bike to life and led 78 Hells Angels down Route 44, away from the destruction, away from the woman who had saved their lives. Mabel watched until they disappeared over the horizon. Then she looked down at the photograph in her hands. Robert and Caleb, her husband and her son, both dead, both gone. "What didn't you tell me, baby?" she whispered to Caleb's smiling face. "What secrets did you take to your grave?" The photograph didn't answer. But somewhere in her gut, Mabel knew. Whatever was coming would change everything she thought she knew about her son. Everything she thought she knew about his death. Everything she thought she knew about the last 20 years of her life. 5 days. 5 days until the truth arrived. She had no idea how right she was. The first day passed in a haze. Mabel wandered through the debris of her farmhouse, picking up fragments, setting them down, picking them up again. A broken picture frame, a water-stained Bible, the handle of Robert's favorite coffee mug, 40 years of memories reduced to rubble. She found her wedding dress, or what was left of it. The white fabric was torn and muddy, wrapped around a fence post 100 yards from where the closet used to be. She pulled it free and held it against her chest. She could still remember the way Robert's eyes had lit up when he saw her walking down the aisle, the way his voice had cracked when he said his vows. "Till death do us part." Death had parted them 22 years ago, and now the tornado had taken even the dress. She slept in her car that night. The back seat was cramped. Her neck kinked at a painful angle. The vinyl seats stuck to her skin every time she moved. But she couldn't leave. This land was all she had left. The second day brought her neighbor. Earl Morrison drove over in his pickup truck at 7 in the morning. He was 73 years old, skin weathered by decades of Oklahoma sun hands, gnarled from a lifetime of farming. "Mabel, you can't stay out here. I'm fine. You're sleeping in a car." "I said I'm fine, Earl." He looked at the destruction around them, the foundation where her house used to be, the half-collapsed barn, the scattered debris that used to be her life. "Come stay with me and Linda," he said. "We've got a spare room, hot meals, real beds." "No, Mabel, I'm not leaving this land." Her voice cracked. "Robert is buried here. Caleb's memorial is here. I'm not leaving." Earl stared at her for a long moment. She could see the arguments forming in his mind, could see him calculating the right combination of words that might convince her to be reasonable. But Earl Morrison had known Mabel Thornton for 40 years. He knew that look in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the steel in her spine. "At least let me bring you a tent," he said finally. "Some supplies. You can't keep sleeping in that car." Mabel nodded. She didn't have the energy to argue. Earl came back 2 hours later with a camping tent, a cooler full of food, and a portable generator. He helped her set up in the clearing beside the ruined barn, working in silence, asking no questions about the Hells Angels or the cellar, or why 79 motorcycles had been parked in her driveway when the tornado hit. That was Earl's way. He helped. He didn't pry. "Thank you," Mabel said when he finished. "You're stubborn as hell, you know that. That's how I've survived this long." Earl drove away. Mabel sat in front of her tent and watched the sun set over the destruction. Orange and pink and purple. Beautiful colors painting a ruined landscape. What did Stone know about Caleb? The question had been eating at her for 2 days. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Stone's face when he looked at that photograph. The recognition, the shock, the lie. He knew something big enough that he needed 5 days to verify it. What could possibly need verification? Caleb died 20 years ago. There was a funeral, a flag, a letter from his commanding officer. Martha had the documents somewhere in the rubble. She had the medals. She had the folded flag in a display case that was now buried under what used to be her living room. What was there to verify? The third day brought the vultures. A sleek black car pulled up to the edge of her property at 10 in the morning. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, looked around with barely concealed disgust, and walked toward Mabel like he owned the place. Mrs. Thornton Mabel set down the piece of broken china she'd been examining. It was part of her grandmother's tea set, one of the few family heirlooms that had survived 4 generations. The tornado had destroyed it in 4 seconds. That's me. I'm Harold Pemberton, Creek County Development Association. He extended a hand, soft palm, manicured nails, the hands of a man who'd never worked a day in his life. Mabel didn't take it. I wanted to speak with you about your property. Pemberton continued, seemingly unbothered by the snub. As you may know, there's been significant interest in developing this area. The tornado damage has accelerated those plans, developing how residential communities, shopping centers, the usual. Pemberton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Your 60 acres are in a prime location, Mrs. Thornton. I'd like to make you an offer. I'm not selling. You haven't heard the offer yet? I don't need to. Mabel's voice was flat. This land belonged to my father. It belonged to my husband. My son's memorial is here. My husband is buried here. I'm not selling. Pemberton's smile flickered. Mrs. Thornton, I understand the sentimental attachment, but surely you can see that rebuilding on this property is impractical. You're 67 years old. You have no income, no insurance, no family to help you. Mabel stood up slowly. Her joints ached. Her muscles screamed. But she drew herself up to her full height, all 5 feet 4 inches of her, and met Pemberton's eyes with a stare that had made doctors and surgeons and hospital administrators back down for 35 years. Mr. Pemberton, she said quietly, I have survived 3 tornadoes. I have buried a husband and a son. I have spent the last 22 years alone on this land, working it with my own 2 hands. You think because my house is gone, I'm going to sell everything I've ever known to some developer who wants to put up a shopping center? I'm offering you a way out. I don't need a way out. I need you to get off my property. Pemberton's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Thornton. This development is happening whether you sell or not. Soon you'll be surrounded by construction. Your peaceful little farm will be worthless. Then I'll sell it for worthless money. Mabel pointed toward his car. Now get out before I find my shotgun. Pemberton stood his ground for another moment. Then he turned and walked back to his car. His Italian leather shoes squelched in the mud. His expensive suit was spattered with Oklahoma dirt. You'll regret this, he called over his shoulder. Mabel watched him drive away. She wouldn't regret it. This land was all she had left, and nobody was taking it from her. The 4th day brought the phone call, unknown number, Oklahoma area code. Mabel's heart jumped as she answered. Hello, Mabel, it's Stone. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. What did you find? A pause. I need to see you in person. Tell me now. This isn't a phone conversation. I don't care. Tell me. Another pause. Longer this time. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, weighing his options, deciding how much to reveal. Did Caleb ever mention a club to you? Mabel's stomach dropped. What club? You know what club. Number. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't. Stone was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man choosing each word with surgical precision. Mabel, I'm coming to see you tomorrow. A day early. I'm bringing some people with me. People who knew your son. Knew him, how. That's what I need to explain in person. Just tell me. Tomorrow, Mabel. I promise you'll understand everything tomorrow. The line went dead. Mabel stared at her phone. People who knew Caleb. Caleb had been in the army. He deployed to Afghanistan 3 times. He died on his 3rd deployment, killed by an IED outside Kandahar. What did that have to do with Hell's Angels? Mabel didn't sleep that night. She sat in her camping chair, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars wheel overhead. Her mind raced through every memory she had of her son. Caleb had been a good kid, quiet, thoughtful. A little wild in high school, sure. Got into a few fights, skipped class sometimes, but nothing serious. Nothing that suggested he was hiding something. He'd straightened out after graduation, got a job at the auto shop in town, started talking about college, about the future, about making something of himself. Then at 21, he'd enlisted. Mabel remembered the day he told her. They were sitting on the porch of the old farmhouse, the one that no longer existed, watching the sunset. I need to do something that matters, Mom. You matter right here. I know. But there's a whole world out there. People who need help. I can't just sit here and pretend that's not true. He'd shipped out 3 months later. For the next 4 years, Mabel had lived for his letters, his phone calls, the brief visits home between deployments. Caleb in his uniform looking so handsome, so grown up, so different from the boy who used to catch fireflies in mason jars on summer evenings. Then the officers came to her door. She'd known before they spoke. She'd known the moment she saw the dress uniforms, the folded flag, the chaplain with his Bible. "Mrs. Thornton, we regret to inform you." She'd stopped listening after that. The funeral was a blur, the memorial service, the 21-gun salute, the flag they pressed into her hands on behalf of a grateful nation. Caleb was gone, and now 20 years later, a man named Stone was telling her there was more to the story. What more could there be? The fifth day dawned gray and cold. Mabel was still in her camping chair, still wrapped in her blanket, still staring at the horizon when she heard them. Motorcycles, not a few, not dozens, hundreds. The sound built slowly, a distant rumble that grew into a roar. The ground beneath her feet began to vibrate. The air itself seemed to tremble. Mabel stood up slowly, her joints screamed, her back ached, but she walked to the edge of her property and looked down the road and stopped breathing. The road was full of motorcycles, as far as she could see in both directions. Black leather and chrome stretching from horizon to horizon. A river of machines and men flowing toward her ruined farm. Stone was at the front. Behind him, a sea of riders stretched into the distance. One by one, they pulled onto her property. They parked in the fields, on the grass, anywhere they could find space. Mabel counted 50, 100, 200. They kept coming. Stone dismounted and walked toward her. His face was serious, almost reverent, like a man approaching sacred ground. "Mabel." His voice was thick. How many stones stopped in front of her? The morning light caught the patches on his vest. The death's head, the words that identified him as president of the Oklahoma chapter. 312, he said, from 18 chapters across the country. Why? Her voice was barely audible. Why are they here? Stone met her eyes. And for the first time, she saw something in his gaze that looked almost like tears. "Because we owe you a debt," he said, "and it's time to pay it." "What debt? I don't understand. What's happening?" Stone turned and whistled. Two older bikers separated from the crowd and walked toward them. One was in his 60s, white beard, a limp in his left leg. The other was younger, maybe 50, with a scar running down his left cheek. "This is Jedediah," Stone said, indicating the older man. "We call him Reverend. He used to be a preacher, believe it or not. And this is Royce. They call him Duke." Stone paused. They served with Caleb. Mabel's legs went weak. Served with him. Served where Rev stepped forward. His eyes were kind, but sad. The eyes of a man who had seen too much death and made too many condolence calls. "In the club, ma'am, not in the army." Mabel shook her head. "No, that's not possible. I would have known." "He didn't want you to know." Duke's voice was rough, gravelly, the voice of a man who had screamed too many times and smoked too many cigarettes. "He knew you wouldn't approve. He kept that part of his life separate." "No." Mabel stumbled backward. Her chest was tight. She couldn't breathe. "My son was a soldier, a hero. He wasn't. He didn't. He did." Reverend's voice was gentle but firm, and he did it because he believed in what we stand for. Brotherhood, loyalty, protecting the people we love. "I don't believe you." Rev reached into his vest and pulled out a photograph. Worn, faded, but clear enough. "Look at this." Mabel's hands were shaking as she took it. The photo showed a group of bikers standing in front of a row of motorcycles, laughing, arms around each other. Brothers. And in the center, grinning at the camera, was Caleb. Her Caleb. He was wearing a leather vest. On the back, clear as day, was the Hells Angels' death's head. Mabel's knees buckled. Stone caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy. I've got you." But Mabel barely heard him. She was staring at the photograph, at her son's face, at the secret he had kept from her for 20 years, at the life she never knew he lived. And for the first time since the tornado, she started to cry. 312 motorcycles. Mabel counted them from where she sat on an overturned crate, a cup of coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. They filled every inch of her property, parked in rows across the fields, lined up along the dirt road, clustered around the ruins of her barn like chrome and leather sentinels, standing guard over sacred ground. 312 men had ridden from 18 states to keep a promise she never knew existed. A promise made by a son she thought she knew. Stone sat beside her. He hadn't left her side since she collapsed. Hadn't spoken either. Just sat there, a solid presence, waiting for her to find her voice again. The photograph was still clutched in her hands. Caleb's face smiled up at her. That familiar grin. Those eyes that had looked at her with love every day of his 25 years on this earth. But now she saw something else in that smile. Something she had missed before. Pride. He was proud of that vest. Proud of those patches. Proud of the men standing beside him with their arms around his shoulders. How long, Mabel's voice came out cracked, broken. How long was he one of you? Stone glanced at Rev, who stepped forward. The old preacher moved slowly, his limp more pronounced now, as if the weight of what he was about to say had settled into his bones. Caleb joined us in 2001, Reverend said. He was 20 years old. Road name was Guardian. Guardian. Mabel tasted the word. It felt foreign on her tongue. Wrong. Like calling a stranger by her son's name. He earned it, Duke said. The scarred man had been standing at the edge of the group, watching with eyes that held old pain. Your son had a gift for protecting people. The weak, the lost, the ones nobody else gave a damn about. He'd find them and take care of them. Like a guardian, Stone added quietly. Mabel shook her head. This doesn't make sense. Caleb was in college in 2001. He was studying business. He was going to take over the farm. He dropped out. Rev's voice was gentle but firm. Second semester of his sophomore year. He never told you. The words hit Mabel like a physical blow. She remembered that year. Caleb had seemed distant, distracted. She'd asked him about school and he'd given vague answers. Doing fine, Mom. Nothing to worry about. She'd believed him. She'd believed every lie he ever told her. Why Mabel looked up at the three men surrounding her. Why would he join her? Why would he keep this from me? Stone exchanged a look with Rev and Duke. Something passed between them. A silent conversation. A decision being made. Because we saved his life, Stone said finally. Mabel went still. Caleb was in trouble in 2000, Rev explained. He sat down on another crate, his old knees creaking. Bad trouble. He'd fallen in with a group at college. Started gambling, got into debt with the wrong people. What kind of people? The kind who break legs when you can't pay. Duke's voice was flat, the kind who don't stop at legs. Mabel's heart clenched. She remembered visiting Caleb that Christmas. He'd seemed nervous, jumpy. He'd flinched when there was a knock at the door. She'd asked if everything was okay, and he'd smiled that familiar smile and said everything was fine. Everything had not been fine. They were going to kill him, Stone said. A local crew, loan sharks with connections to organized crime. Caleb owed them $40,000, and he had no way to pay. $40,000, Mabel's voice was hollow. How poker? Rev shook his head. The boy thought he was good at cards. He wasn't. Lost big a few times trying to win back what he'd already lost. Classic spiral. How did you find him? Some of our brothers in the area heard about a kid who was about to get himself killed. Stone's jaw tightened. We looked into it. Found out Caleb was Robert Thornton's son. Mabel's breath caught. You knew Robert knew of him? Stone met her eyes. Your husband had a reputation in certain circles. Helped some of our brothers back in the 80s. Never joined the club, but he did right by us when it mattered. Robert had never mentioned anything about Hell's Angels. But then again, Robert had kept his own secrets. Mabel was beginning to realize that the men in her life had hidden entire worlds from her. We gave Caleb a choice, Rev continued. Pay off his debt by working for the people who wanted to hurt him. Become their errand boy, their punching bag, their property, or join us. Let us handle the debt. Let us protect him. You paid off $40,000 for a stranger. He wasn't a stranger. Stone's voice was firm. He was Robert Thornton's son. And besides, we didn't exactly pay the debt. Mabel looked at him sharply. What does that mean? It means those loan sharks suddenly decided Oklahoma wasn't a healthy place to do business. Duke almost smiled. It means they forgave all outstanding debts and relocated to a different state. Mabel didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. So Caleb joined because you saved him, she said slowly. Because he owed you at first. Rev nodded, but that's not why he stayed. He stayed because he found something he'd been looking for his whole life. What a purpose! Rev's eyes were distant, seeing memories from 2 decades past. Brotherhood, a place where he belonged. Caleb wasn't like most of the young men who come to us looking for excitement or trouble. He came looking for meaning. He found it. Duke added, in the club, in the work we do, in protecting people who can't protect themselves. Mabel stared at the photograph again, at her son surrounded by men in leather vests, at the smile on his face that she now recognized as genuine happiness. Why didn't he tell me? The question hung in the air. The real question. The one that mattered more than all the others. Rev sighed. He was afraid you'd be disappointed in him, afraid you'd see him differently, love him less. That's ridiculous. Mabel's voice cracked. I could never love him less. He was my son. He knew that. Stone put his hand on her shoulder. In his head he knew, but in his heart he was terrified of losing you. So he kept the two parts of his life separate, his family and his brotherhood. He shouldn't have had to choose. No, Stone squeezed her shoulder. He shouldn't have. But he did, and we respected that choice. Mabel wiped her eyes. 20 years. 20 years I thought I knew my son. 20 years I grieved for the boy I raised. And this whole time there was this whole other person I never met. You did meet him, Reverend said gently. The Caleb you knew was real. The kindness, the courage, the way he always wanted to protect people. That was him. The club didn't change who he was. It just gave him a place to be who he was. A commotion near the road interrupted them. More bikers were arriving, trucks too loaded with lumber and tools and construction equipment. Men in leather vests were unloading materials, shouting instructions, organizing themselves with military precision. What's happening? Mabel asked. Stone stood up and offered her his hand. Come see. He led her through the crowd of bikers toward what used to be her farmhouse. The foundation was still there, cleared now of debris. Men were measuring, marking, preparing. What is this? This is us keeping a promise. Stone's voice was thick. Caleb made us swear something before he deployed that last time. Made us promise that if anything happened to him, we'd take care of you. Mabel's heart stopped. What Rev appeared beside them holding an envelope. Old, yellowed, water-stained. Caleb knew he might not come home from that deployment, Reverend said. So he came to our chapter president, a man we called Hawk, made him swear on his life that the club would protect you, take care of you, make sure you never struggled alone. He reached out and pressed the envelope into Mabel's hands. This belongs to you. Mabel's fingers trembled as she opened it. The paper was fragile, threatening to fall apart at her touch. Inside was a single sheet covered in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. Caleb's handwriting. The messy scrawl, the letters that leaned too far to the right, the way he always pressed too hard with his pen, leaving grooves in the paper. Mom, she read, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. Her vision blurred with tears. She blinked them away and kept reading. I need you to know something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I'm a Hell's Angel. I know that probably shocks you. I know you've heard things about the club. Bad things. Some of them are true, but not all of them. And the brothers I ride with are the best men I've ever known. They saved my life, Mom. When I was 20 and stupid and about to get myself killed, they stepped in. They gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to keep going. Mabel had to stop, had to breathe, had to remember how to make her lungs work. I joined the army because I wanted to protect people, because I wanted to serve something bigger than myself. But I learned how to do that from my brothers first. They taught me what it means to have someone's back, what it means to put your life on the line for the people you love. She wiped her eyes and kept reading. Here's the important part. I made them promise that if anything happens to me, they'll take care of you. I don't care if it's next year or 20 years from now. If you ever need help, they'll be there. You're not just my mother, Mom. You're their mother, too. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. I love you. I've always loved you. I'm sorry I kept this secret. I was afraid you'd be disappointed in me. I hope you can forgive me. Take care of yourself. And let the boys take care of you, too. That's all I've ever wanted. Your son, Caleb. P.S. Road name Guardian. Ask Reverend about it. He'll tell you the story. Mabel read the letter 3 times. Then she collapsed against Stone's chest and sobbed. 20 years. 20 years of loneliness. 20 years of struggling alone on this farm. 20 years of counting every dollar and every day and every hour without another human voice. And all that time Caleb had tried to protect her. All that time there had been a family waiting for her. If only she had known. Stone held her while she cried. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Around them, 300 bikers stood in silence. Some had tears in their own eyes. Some had their heads bowed. Some were working unloading trucks, measuring lumber, but even they moved quietly, reverently, as if they understood the sacred weight of this moment. He loved you more than anything, Rev said softly. Every time he came back from a run, first thing he'd do was call you, make sure you were okay. He used to say you were the strongest woman he ever knew. Mabel pulled back from Stone, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Why didn't I get this letter before? Why didn't anyone come? Because Hawk died. Stone's voice was heavy with old grief. 3 months after Caleb. Motorcycle accident on Highway 44. The letter got lost in the chaos. Different presidents, different priorities. Nobody knew where you were. And then you saved 79 of my brothers from a tornado. Stone's eyes held hers. When the news coverage hit, one of our archivists recognized your name. Thornton, Robert Thornton's widow, Caleb Guardian Thornton's mother. He dug through 20 years of records and found the letter. Mabel shook her head slowly. All because I opened my cellar. All because you opened your heart. Reverend put his hand over hers. Caleb always said you were the most generous person he knew. Said you'd give the shirt off your back to a stranger if they needed it. He was right, Duke added. We saw it ourselves. 79 strangers in your driveway, and you didn't hesitate. Mabel looked around at the organized chaos surrounding her. Men were framing walls now. Others were mixing concrete. The skeleton of a house was beginning to take shape on the foundation where her old home had stood. What happens now? She asked. Now we keep the promise. Stone's voice was firm. Now we build you a new house. Now we take care of you the way Caleb wanted. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. Stone met her eyes. Caleb asked, 20 years ago, we're just 20 years late in answering. But the cost, this must be, don't worry about the cost. We've got it handled. I can't let you spend that kind of money on me. You're not letting us do anything. Stone's jaw tightened. We're doing this because we promised, because Caleb was our brother, because you opened your door when 79 of us needed shelter. He gestured at the men working around them. Every brother here contributed. Every chapter. We've got contractors, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, men who build houses for a living. This isn't charity, Mabel. This is family taking care of family. Mabel didn't have words. She just stood there watching strangers build her a home, tears streaming down her face. Family. She hadn't had family in 20 years. Now she had 300 brothers. The construction continued all day. Mabel tried to help, but the men wouldn't let her. Your job is to rest, a young biker told her. Our job is to build. So she watched, and she listened. Different bikers approached her throughout the day, introducing themselves, shaking her hand, telling her stories about Caleb. Guardian talked me off a ledge once, a man named Rusty said. Literally, I was on an overpass at 3 in the morning ready to end it all. He found me, sat with me until sunrise, never told a soul. Your son was the first person who welcomed me when I prospected, another man said. His name was Bones, treated me like a brother from day one. Most guys make you earn respect. Caleb just gave it. Guardian is the reason I got clean, a third man told her. His eyes were wet. He said I was worth more than the needle. First person who ever believed that. Story after story, memory after memory, a picture of her son she had never known. The Caleb she remembered was good, kind, loyal. The Caleb they described was all of that and more. He was a hero, not just in the army, not just in death, but in life, in the small moments. In the quiet acts of courage that nobody saw, Mabel wished she had known. She wished he had trusted her enough to tell her, but she understood why he hadn't, understood the fear of disappointing the people you love, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing the one person whose opinion mattered most. Caleb had kept his secret to protect her, And in the end, it was that secret that brought her a new family. Around noon, Harold Pemberton returned. His black car pulled up to the edge of the property, and Mabel felt her spine stiffen. She watched him step out his expensive suit, a stark contrast to the leather vests and work clothes surrounding her. This time she wasn't alone. Stone materialized beside her before Pemberton had taken 3 steps. Duke appeared on her other side. Rev moved to block the path forward. "Mrs. Thornton," Pemberton's voice was strained. "I see you have company. I see you can't take no for an answer. I came to talk business." "The lady already gave you her answer," Stone said. His voice was calm, friendly even. But something in his tone made Pemberton stop walking. "This is a private conversation." "Then you shouldn't have it in public." Stone stepped forward. 1 step. That's all. But suddenly the space between them seemed smaller, more dangerous. Every biker within earshot had stopped working. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward the confrontation. Pemberton's face paled slightly. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "Then leave. I have a legal right to make an offer on this property. And she has a legal right to refuse." Stone tilted his head. "Which she's done. Twice now." Pemberton tried to look past Stone to Mabel. "Mrs. Thornton, please. Be reasonable. You're 67 years old. You have no house, no income, no family. She has family." Stone's voice dropped. 300 of us. Every chapter, every state. You want to make her life difficult? You're making a lot of men very angry. Is that a threat?" "It's information." Pemberton stood his ground for another moment. Then Duke cracked his knuckles. Not aggressively, just casually, like he was stretching after a long ride. "It was enough. This isn't over," Pemberton said, backing toward his car. "You can't intimidate me. I have resources. So do we." Stone didn't blink. "Drive safe, Mr. Pemberton." The black car sped away, spraying gravel. Mabel let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "That man's been circling this property for years," she said. "The tornado probably seemed like a gift to him." "He'll be back," Stone agreed. "Developers don't give up easy." "What do I do?" "You don't do anything." Stone turned to face her. "We handle it. I can't ask you to fight my battles." "You didn't ask." He almost smiled. "But we're fighting them anyway." That evening, Mabel found herself sitting by a fire pit someone had constructed from salvaged stones. The construction had paused for the day. The framing was done. The skeleton of her new house stood against the darkening sky bones of wood waiting to become a home. Bikers gathered around other fires scattered across the property. The smell of cooking meat drifted through the air. Laughter echoed in the darkness. For the first time in 20 years, Mabel's land sounded alive. Duke sat down beside her without asking permission. He handed her a bottle of water and settled into the camp chair, like a man with something heavy on his mind. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "You've been telling me things all day. One more won't hurt. This one might." Mabel looked at him sharply. His scarred face was half hidden in shadow, but she could see his eyes. They were haunted. "I served with Caleb," Duke said. "Not just in the club, in the army. You were in Afghanistan together, same unit. Different squads, but we deployed together. Looked out for each other over there, just like we looked out for each other here." He paused, took a long drink of water. His hands were trembling slightly. "The day he died, I was there." Mabel's heart clenched. "I was 2 vehicles behind him in the convoy. We were running supplies from FOB Cobra to a village about 20 clicks north. Routine mission. We'd done it a dozen times." What happened? Duke was quiet for a long moment. "We hit a choke point. Narrow road, hills on both sides. Perfect ambush terrain. I remember thinking we should have taken the longer route. I remember thinking something felt wrong. But you kept going, orders or orders." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing guitar. A slow, sad song that seemed to match the weight of Duke's words. The first RPG hit Caleb's Humvee dead center, blew the engine apart. Vehicle caught fire immediately. Mabel closed her eyes. He got out. Duke's voice was barely audible. He was hurt. Burns on his arms, I think. But he got out. And instead of taking Wolfear, instead of running to safety, he grabbed his rifle and started moving toward the enemy positions. Why? Because they were focused on him. As long as they were shooting at Caleb, They weren't shooting at the rest of us. Tears streamed down Mabel's face. He drew their fire. Duke continued. Gave us time to dismount and find cover. Held them off for 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Saved at least 12 lives. How did he headshot? Duke met her eyes. Instant. He didn't suffer. Mabel didn't know if that made it better or worse. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire burned low. The guitar player finished his song and started another. There's something else, Duke said finally. Mabel looked at him. The ambush was too perfect, too coordinated. They knew exactly when we'd be coming, exactly how many vehicles, exactly where to set up. What are you saying? I'm saying someone told them. Duke's jaw tightened. Someone in our unit leaked the information. Mabel went cold. After the attack, I started asking questions, poking around, talking to people who might know something. Did you find anything, a name? Duke's voice dropped to a whisper. Raymond Slater, sergeant. He was in charge of logistics, knew all the convoy schedules, all the routes. Why would he do it? Money. Slater was dirty. Had been for years. Selling equipment to contractors, skimming supplies, running side deals with anyone who'd pay. Caleb found out. Started collecting evidence. Mabel's hands clenched into fists. Caleb confronted him about a month before the ambush. Told Slater he was going to report him. Slater laughed. Said nobody would believe some junior soldier over a sergeant with 15 years in. But Caleb didn't back down. Caleb never backed down from anything. Duke shook his head. That's what got him killed. You're saying Slater sold out my son, had him murdered. I'm saying I believe that with every fiber of my being. But I couldn't prove it. Took my suspicions to command. They said there wasn't enough evidence. Case went cold. Mabel stared into the fire. Her mind was spinning. For 20 years, she had believed her son died in a random attack, a tragic casualty of war, senseless but unavoidable. Now she was learning it wasn't random at all. Someone had murdered her boy and gotten away with it. Where is Slater now? Gone. Duke's voice was bitter. Discharged 6 months after Caleb died. Changed his name. Disappeared. You've been looking for him off and on for 20 years. Never could find him. Mabel looked at Duke, at the scars on his face, at the haunted look in his eyes, at the guilt that had been eating at him for 2 decades. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For trying, for caring, for not forgetting. Duke's eyes glistened. Caleb was my brother, in the club and in the war. I owed him that much. You don't owe him anything anymore. Mabel reached out and took his hand. You tried to get him justice. That's more than most people would do. Duke squeezed her hand once, then let go. He stood up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I should get some sleep, he said. Long day tomorrow. Duke, he turned back. If there was a way to find Slater, a way to prove what he did, would you help me? Duke studied her face for a long moment, in a heartbeat. He walked away into the darkness. Mabel sat alone by the dying fire, thinking about her son, thinking about the man who killed him, thinking about justice. 20 years was a long time, but it wasn't too long. Later that night, Stone found her still sitting by the embers. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Too much in my head. He sat down beside her. The camp was quiet now. Most of the bikers had retreated to their tents or their bedrolls. The half-built house stood silent against the stars. Duke told you, Stone said. It wasn't a question. About the ambush. About Slater. Yes, Stone nodded slowly. We've been trying to find that bastard for 20 years. Duke said he changed his name. He did. Stone pulled out his phone, scrolled through something. But we have resources he doesn't know about. Contacts in places you wouldn't expect. Mabel's heart began to beat faster. Raymond Slater became Richard Turner about 6 months after he left the Army, Stone said. Moved around for a few years. Florida, Texas, Arizona. Then he settled in Henderson, Nevada. Nevada, just outside Vegas. Stone looked at her. Works at an auto dealership. Married, 2 kids, nice house in a nice neighborhood. Living the American dream. While my son rots in the ground. While your son rots in the ground. Mabel stared at the dying embers. Orange and red and gray, the colors of fire, fading into ash. I want to find him, she said. Stone was quiet. I want to look him in the eye. I want him to know that I know. I want to see if there's any guilt in him at all, any remorse, anything human. And if there isn't, then at least I'll know. Mabel turned to face him. Caleb deserved better than this, better than being murdered and forgotten, better than having his killer walk free for 20 years. This could be dangerous, Stone said carefully. Slater's not going to welcome visitors asking questions about his past. I don't care, I do. I'm not going to put you in harm's way. Then come with me. Mabel's voice hardened. Bring your brothers. Make sure I'm safe. But I'm going to Nevada, Stone, with or without you. Stone studied her face for a long moment. The firelight played across her features, illuminating the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the steel in her spine. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He let out a long breath. We finish the house first. Another week, maybe less. Get you settled. Make sure everything's in order. And then we ride to Nevada. Stone's voice was hard. We find Slater and we get you the answers you deserve. Mabel felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been wound tight for 20 years. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. Stone stood up. This might not end the way you want. We might not find proof. Slater might deny everything. You might have to walk away with nothing but questions. I've had nothing but questions for 20 years. Mabel stood up beside him. At least now I'll be asking them to the right person. Stone nodded slowly. Get some rest, Mabel. We've got a lot of work to do. He walked away into the darkness. Mabel stood alone watching the last embers die. Caleb had been murdered. Raymond Slater had killed him. And in 1 week, maybe less, she was going to look that man in the eye and demand the truth. She didn't know what would happen after that. She didn't care. All she knew was that her son deserved justice, and she was going to get it for him, no matter what it cost. The next morning, Mabel made a decision. She walked through the construction site until she found Stone, who was reviewing blueprints with 2 other men. He looked up when she approached. I found something, Mabel said. What in the rubble? Yesterday, while everyone was working, I was going through what was left of my things. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. A USB drive. Stone's eyes narrowed. What's on it? I don't know. Mabel's voice was steady. But I found it in Caleb's Bible. The family Bible that's been passed down for 4 generations. It was hollowed out, hidden. Stone took the drive, carefully turning it over in his hands. When did Caleb have access to this Bible, his last visit home? Mabel's mind was racing. 3 weeks before he deployed. He spent a lot of time in his old room, said he was being nostalgic. You think he hid this deliberately? I think my son knew he might not come home. And I think he left something for me. Something he wanted me to find. Stone looked at the USB drive. Such a small thing. Such potential for answers. We need a computer, he said. I know where to get one. An hour later, they were gathered in the back of a pickup truck. Stone was done, Reverend Duke, Mabel, and a laptop borrowed from one of the younger bikers. Mabel plugged in the USB drive. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared on the screen. Guardian Insurance. That's what he called it, Rev said softly. His insurance policy, in case anything went wrong. Mabel clicked on the folder. Files appeared, dozens of them. Documents, photographs, audio recordings, spreadsheets. Oh my God, Duke breathed. It was all there. Raymond Slater's crimes laid out in meticulous detail. Equipment sales to unauthorized contractors. Money transfers to offshore accounts. Falsified inventory reports. Kickbacks from suppliers. And communications. Encrypted messages between Slater and someone identified only as contact. Discussing convoy schedules. Patrol routes. Weak points in base security. He was selling information to the enemy, Stone said. His voice was barely controlled. For money. Mabel scrolled through the files. Her hands were trembling. Her vision blurred with tears. Caleb had documented everything. Dates, teams, amounts, names. He'd been building a case. He'd been preparing to bring Slater down. And Slater had found out. There, Duke pointed at the screen. That date, 3 weeks before the ambush. A message from Slater to contact. Problem with Guardian. Knows too much. Need permanent solution. Mabel's blood turned to ice. Permanent solution. Her son had been murdered because he knew too much, and now she held the proof. This changes everything, Stone said. His voice was hard. This isn't just confrontation anymore. This is evidence. Evidence of what Duke asked. Treason, murder, conspiracy. Stone looked at Mabel. With this, we can destroy him. Mabel stared at the screen, at her son's meticulous work, at the insurance policy he'd left behind. 20 years. For 20 years, this USB drive had been hidden in a Bible waiting for her to find it. For 20 years, the truth had been buried in the rubble of her life. The tornado had destroyed her house, but it had also uncovered her son's final gift. We go to Nevada, Mabel said. Her voice was steel. We take this evidence, and we make Raymond Slater answer for what he did. Stone nodded. I'll make the calls. When do we leave? 3 days. Stone stood up. Soon as the house is secure. Mabel looked at the laptop screen one last time, at the words that would bring her son's killer to justice. Guardian insurance. Caleb had protected her even from the grave. Now it was her turn to protect his legacy. The Nevada desert stretched out before them like a sea of brown and gold shimmering under the afternoon sun. Mabel had never been to this part of the country, had never seen landscapes so flat, so empty, so utterly different from the rolling green hills of Oklahoma. But she wasn't here for the scenery. She was here for Raymond Slater. 20 motorcycles rumbled down the highway toward Henderson. Stone led the formation with Mabel riding behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, the USB drive tucked safely in her jacket pocket. Rev and Duke flanked them. Behind came 16 other brothers' men who had volunteered for this mission without hesitation. They had left Oklahoma 3 days ago. 3 days of riding through Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. 3 days of cheap motels and truck-stop diners and endless miles of asphalt. 3 days for Mabel to think about what she was going to say to the man who murdered her son. She still didn't know. Some things couldn't be planned. Henderson appeared on the horizon around 4 in the afternoon. A sprawl of suburban houses and strip malls clustered at the edge of Las Vegas like barnacles on a ship. Clean streets, manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Except a murderer lived here. They pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of town. Stone killed his engine and helped Mabel off the bike. How are you feeling? He asked. Mabel stretched her aching back. She was 67 years old. She had just spent 3 days on the back of a motorcycle. Every joint in her body screamed in protest. Ready, she said. Stone nodded. He pulled out his phone and checked something on the screen. 2847 Desert Rose Lane. About 10 minutes from here. Mabel's heart hammered in her chest. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until she faced the man who had destroyed her world. Stone gathered the group around him. 20 men in leather vests standing in a gas station parking lot drawing nervous glances from the customers filling their tanks. Here's how this goes, Stone said. We stay calm. We stay controlled. No matter what Slater says or does, we don't give him any excuse to call the cops and play victim. What if he runs? Duke asked. He won't run. Stone's voice was certain. Men like Slater have too much to lose. He's got a house, a family, a reputation. He's not going to throw all that away by bolting. What if he denies everything? Then Mabel shows him the evidence. Stone looked at her. After that, it's her call. Mabel nodded. She understood. This was her mission, her confrontation, her justice to claim or deny. The brothers were here to protect her, but the fight was hers alone. They mounted up again. 20 engines roared to life. 20 motorcycles pulled out of the gas station and headed into the heart of Henderson. Desert Rose Lane was exactly what Mabel expected. Cookie-cutter houses lined both sides of the street, each one identical to its neighbor, distinguished only by the color of the shutters or the style of the mailbox. Perfectly trimmed hedges, perfectly green lawns, perfectly ordinary people living perfectly ordinary lives. Number 2847 sat in the middle of the block, a beige 2-story with brown shutters, a red minivan in the driveway, a basketball hoop mounted above the garage door, wind chimes tinkling on the front porch. The home of a family man, the home of a murderer. Stone pulled to the curb 3 houses down. The other bikes spread out along the street, parking at intervals, creating a perimeter without being obvious about it. Last chance to change your mind, Stone said quietly. Mabel climbed off the bike. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady when she answered. I didn't come this far to turn back. She walked toward the house. Reverend Duke fell into step beside her. Stone followed a few paces behind. The other brothers stayed with the bikes, watching, waiting. The front door seemed to grow larger with each step Mabel took. She climbed the porch steps, raised her hand, knocked. Footsteps inside. The sound of a television being muted. A woman's voice calling something Mabel couldn't quite hear. The door opened, and Mabel found herself face to face with the man who had killed her son. Raymond Slater was smaller than she expected. Average height, thinning gray hair, a forgettable face, the kind you'd pass on the street without a second glance. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, holding a can of beer in one hand. He looked like someone's dad. He looked like anyone's neighbor. He didn't look like a murderer. "Can I help you?" His voice was pleasant, polite, not a trace of guilt or recognition. Raymond Slater, something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second, a shadow passing across his face. "I'm sorry. You must have the wrong house. My name is Richard Turner. Your name is Raymond Slater." Mabel's voice didn't waver. "You served in the United States Army from 1989 to 2005. You were stationed at FOB Cobra in Afghanistan from 2003 to 2004. You were a logistics sergeant." Slater's hand tightened on his beer can. "I don't know what you're talking about. You knew my son." Mabel took a step forward. "Caleb Thornton, specialist Caleb Thornton, road name guardian. You killed him." The beer can slipped from Slater's fingers. It hit the porch floor with a hollow clang, foam spilling across the wooden boards. Slater's face had gone the color of old ash. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Yes, you do." Mabel reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph. Caleb's army portrait, the one they had used at his funeral. She held it up in front of Slater's face. "This was my son. He discovered you were selling equipment, selling information. He was going to report you." "This is insane." Slater's voice rose. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sarah, call the police." A woman appeared in the doorway behind him. Blonde, mid-40s, worried eyes darting between her husband and the strangers on her porch. "Richard, what's going on? Who are these people?" "It's nothing, honey. Just a misunderstanding. Go back inside." "It's not a misunderstanding." Mabel stepped closer to Slater, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "You sold my son out to the enemy. You told them exactly when and where his convoy would be. You had him murdered to protect your dirty money." "That's a lie, is it?" Mabel pulled out the USB drive. Slater's face went from ash gray to paper white. "Do you know what this is?" Mabel asked. No answer. "This is everything." Mabel's voice was ice. "Every document, every transaction, every communication between you and your contact. Caleb collected it all. He was building a case against you, and he hid it where no one would ever think to look." "That's not possible." Slater's voice cracked. "All his evidence was destroyed. I made sure of it. You made sure of the copies he kept on base." Mabel smiled. It was a terrible smile. The smile of a mother who had waited 20 years for this moment. "But Caleb was smarter than you. He made another copy, hid it in his family Bible. And last week I found it." Slater stumbled backward. His wife caught his arm. "Richard, what is she talking about? What evidence? Nothing. It's nothing. She's lying. Am I?" Mabel held up the USB drive. "Want me to tell your wife what's on here? Want me to tell your neighbors?" She gestured at the houses around them. Curtains were twitching. Doors were opening. The commotion had attracted attention. "Keep your voice down." Slater's words came out as a hiss. "Why afraid of what people might hear?" "You don't understand." Slater ran a hand through his thinning hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I didn't mean for anyone to die." Mabel went very still. "What did you say?" "I said I didn't mean for anyone to die." Slater's voice broke. "I just wanted to scare him. Make him back off. I told them to capture him, hold him for ransom, buy me time to cover my tracks." "You told who?" "You know who. The enemies you were selling information to. They weren't supposed to kill him." Slater's eyes were wild, desperate, pleading. "I swear to God I never wanted that. It was supposed to be a kidnapping, a negotiation. I was going to pay the ransom myself, get him back, make the whole thing go away." "But they didn't kidnap him." "No." Slater's voice was barely a whisper. They ambushed the convoy, killed everyone they could. Your son, he ran toward them, drew their fire, saved a lot of people before they got him. Mabel's knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself to stand straight, forced herself to meet Slater's eyes. You killed my son for money. I never meant. You sold him out to save yourself. Please, you have to understand. The only thing I understand is that my boy is dead. Mabel's voice rose. 20 years I thought he died in a random attack. 20 years I grieved, and this whole time it was you. I'm sorry. Slater fell to his knees, right there on his front porch in front of his wife, in front of his neighbors who were now gathering on their lawns. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back, I know. Sorry doesn't give me back the 20 years I spent alone. I know. Sorry doesn't mean anything coming from you. Slater looked up at her. His face was streaked with tears. Snot ran from his nose. He was shaking so badly he could barely stay upright. What do you want from me? He asked. Mabel stared down at him. What did she want? For 20 years she had wanted answers. Now she had them. For 20 years she had wanted someone to blame. Now she had him. For 20 years she had wanted justice. And justice was about to arrive. I want you to stand up, Mabel said. Slater blinked. Stand up. Face your wife, face your neighbors, and tell them what you did. Please. I have children. So did I. The words hit Slater like a physical blow. He flinched, closed his eyes, swayed on his knees like a man who had just taken a mortal wound. Richard. His wife's voice was trembling. Richard, what is she talking about? What did you do? Slater didn't answer. Tell her. Mabel's voice was steel. Tell her what you did to my son. Slater looked up at his wife, at the woman he had built a life with, at the mother of his children, at the person who had trusted him for 15 years of marriage. I was a different man, he said. Before you, before the kids, I did things, terrible things. What things I sold information to the enemy. Slater's voice was hollow. Equipment, schedules, convoy routes. And when someone threatened to expose me, I had him killed. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. It was 20 years ago, before we met, before any of this. You murdered someone, I didn't pull the trigger. But yes, I had him killed. Sarah backed away from her husband. Her face was white, her eyes were wide with horror. I don't know you, Sarah, please. I don't know who you are. She turned and ran into the house, the door slammed behind her. Slater stayed on his knees staring at the closed door, at the life that had just collapsed around him. The neighbors were openly watching now. Some had their phones out recording. Others were whispering to each other, spreading the news like wildfire. A police siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. You should go. Slater's voice was dead. Before the cops get here, I'm not going anywhere. Mabel crossed her arms. I've been waiting 20 years for this. I can wait a few more minutes. The sirens grew louder. A Henderson police cruiser turned onto Desert Rose Lane. Then another. Then a third. They pulled up in front of Slater's house. Officers stepped out, hands on their weapons, assessing the situation. What's going on here? The lead officer called out. This man is wanted for questioning in connection with the murder of a United States soldier. Mabel's voice carried across the lawn. I have evidence of his crimes. She held up the USB drive. The officer's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. I'm not going anywhere. Mabel didn't move, and neither is he. Not until someone takes this evidence and starts asking the right questions. Another car pulled up. Not a police cruiser, a black sedan with government plates. A man stepped out. Tall, gray-haired, military bearing, a face that had seen wars and made hard decisions. Colonel Warren Briggs. That's far enough, that colonel said to the police officers. This is a federal matter now. The officers exchanged confused glances, but held their positions. Briggs walked past them, past the gathering crowd of neighbors, past Stone and Reverend and Duke, until he stood in front of Mabel. Mrs. Thornton. His voice was formal, but not unfriendly. I've been waiting for this day. Mabel stared at him. You know who I am. I knew your son. Briggs glanced at Slater, still kneeling on the porch. And I've spent 20 years trying to prove what this man did. 20 years I was assigned to investigate the ambush that killed Caleb. Found evidence of a leak. Found Slater's name. Briggs's jaw tightened. But every time I got close, doors closed. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses stopped talking. The cover-up. The Army doesn't like admitting its people can be traitors. Briggs looked at the USB drive in Mabel's hand. But with that, we might finally have enough. It's all there. Mabel handed him the drive. Everything Caleb collected. Everything Slater tried to destroy. Briggs took the drive carefully like a man handling something precious. This changes everything, Mrs. Thornton. He looked at her with respect. Your son was a hero, not just in how he died, but in how he lived. He saw evil and refused to ignore it. And even from the grave, he's bringing his killer to justice. Mabel's eyes filled with tears. That's all I wanted, for the world to know the truth. They'll know. Briggs pocketed the USB drive. I'll make sure of it. He turned to the police officers. Take Raymond Slater into custody. The charge is conspiracy to commit murder in the death of a United States soldier. More charges will follow. The officers moved forward. Slater didn't resist. He rose to his feet like a man sleepwalking, hands hanging limply at his sides. One officer read him his rights. Another put him in handcuffs. Slater looked at Mabel one last time as they led him toward the police cruiser. I'm sorry, he said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Mabel met his eyes. It's not worth anything, she said. They put him in the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, the engine started, and just like that, Raymond Slater was gone. The crowd dispersed slowly. The neighbors retreated to their houses, buzzing with gossip and speculation. The police cruisers drove away. The black sedan followed. Only the bikers remained. Stone appeared at Mabel's side. You okay? Mabel watched the cruiser disappear around the corner. I don't know, she said honestly. I thought I'd feel different. Victorious. Satisfied. What do you feel? Empty. Mabel shook her head. Empty and tired. That's normal. Stone put his arm around her shoulders. Justice doesn't fill the hole grief leaves behind. It just stops it from getting bigger. Will he go to prison? With that evidence, Stone nodded. For a long time. Good. Mabel turned away from the house on Desert Rose Lane, away from the basketball hoop in the wind chimes and the shattered remnants of a murderer's perfect life. It was over. 20 years of questions finally answered. 20 years of grief finally given meaning. 20 years of injustice finally corrected. Let's go home, Mabel said. Stone smiled. Yes, ma'am. The ride back to Oklahoma took 4 days. 4 days of desert and mountains and endless sky. 4 days of small towns and long roads and brothers riding beside her. 4 days for Mabel to process everything that had happened. Slater had confessed. The evidence had been secured. The wheels of justice were finally turning. Colonel Briggs called her on the second day. The USB drive was a goldmine, he said. Not just evidence against Slater, but evidence against a whole network of corruption. Contractors, officers, government officials. The investigation was expanding by the hour. Caleb had done more than document one man's crimes. He had exposed an entire system, and it was all coming down. The Washington Post called on the third day, a journalist named Catherine Langford. She had gotten wind of the story and wanted an exclusive. Mabel agreed. The article ran the day after they crossed back into Oklahoma. Military cover-up exposed soldier's death was murder. The headline spread across the internet like wildfire. Caleb's photo appeared on every news channel. His story was told on every podcast and radio show. The son Mabel had thought she knew became a national hero. The murderer who had killed him became a national villain. And the mother who had never stopped searching for the truth became something else entirely. A symbol of justice delayed but not denied, of love that transcended death, of a 77-year-old woman who had stared down evil and won. They arrived back at the farm on a Saturday afternoon. Mabel climbed off Stone's bike and stood in the driveway of her new home. It was beautiful, craftsman style with a wide porch, solar panels on the roof, fresh paint in color she loved, a garden already planted with flowers around the foundation. And above the front door, a wooden plaque carved with the Hells Angels' death's head, surrounded by angel wings. Here lives Mabel Thornton, it read, Mother of the Hells Angels. Mabel's eyes filled with tears. Stone appeared beside her. Welcome home, home. She tasted the word. She hadn't had a real home in 22 years, had almost forgotten what it felt like to have a place where she belonged. This was her place now, built by brothers, paid for with love, christened with justice. There's one more thing, Stone said. Mabel looked at him. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small piece of leather. It showed the Hells Angels' death's head with a golden border. Beneath it was stitched a single word, Mother. This has never been given to an outsider, Stone said. Not once in the history of the club. But the presidents of every chapter voted unanimous. Mabel couldn't speak. You're not just Caleb's mother anymore. Stone pressed the patch into her hand. You're our mother, all 300 of us. Mabel stared at the patch, at the symbol of belonging she had never expected to receive. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Yes, you do. Stone's voice was firm. You saved 79 of us from a tornado. You fought for your son's memory. You stood up to a murderer and brought him to justice. You're the strongest woman any of us have ever known. Mabel closed her fingers around the patch. I accept, she said. Stone's face broke into a rare smile. Then let's make it official. 300 bikers gathered in the field behind Mabel's new house as the sun began to set. They stood in rows, torches casting flickering light across their faces. Leather vests, chrome buckles. The death's head symbol repeated 300 times, surrounding Mabel like an army of guardian angels. Stone stepped up onto a small platform that had been built for the occasion. Mabel stood beside him, still clutching the patch in her hand. Brother Stone called out. His voice carried across the gathering. We're here tonight to do something that's never been done before in the history of our club. The crowd fell silent. 20 years ago, a man named Caleb Thornton joined our family. Road name Guardian. He was one of the best men any of us ever knew. Brave, loyal, willing to dash for his brothers. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Caleb gave his life in service to his country. But before he shipped out, he made us a promise. He asked us to take care of his mother, to treat her as our own, to make sure she never struggled alone. Stone's voice hardened. We failed that promise. For 20 years, Mabel Thornton struggled alone. She lost her husband. She lost her son. She lost her home. And we weren't there for her. Silence. Heavy. Ashamed. But then fate gave us a second chance. A tornado brought 79 of our brothers to Mabel's door. And instead of locking herself away, she ran toward them. She saved 79 lives that night. 79 brothers who are here tonight because of her. Stone turned to face the crowd. Mabel Thornton didn't know him about Caleb's promise. She didn't expect anything in return for what she did. She just saw people in trouble and decided to help. That's who she is. That's who she's always been. He reached out and took the patch from Mabel's hand. Tonight, we're going to keep Caleb's promise. Tonight, we're going to give Mabel Thornton something that's never been given to an outsider in the history of the Hells Angels. He held up the patch so everyone could see. The golden border gleamed in the torchlight. From this day forward, Mabel Thornton is no longer an outsider. She's no longer just Caleb's mother. She's our mother. Every brother, every chapter, every state, he turned to Mabel. When she needs help, we answer. When she calls, we come. Because that's what family does. Do you accept this patch? Do you accept us as your family? Mabel looked out at the crowd. 300 faces, 300 stories, 300 people who had come from all over the country to witness this moment. I accept, she said. The crowd erupted, cheers, roars. The thunder of 300 voices raised in celebration. Men who had never shown emotion in their lives wiped tears from their eyes. Men who had never called anyone mother embraced the word like a prayer. Stone pinned the patch to Mabel's shirt right over her heart. Welcome to the family, Mom. Mabel couldn't speak, could barely see through her tears. She just stood there, surrounded by brothers, feeling something she hadn't felt in 20 years. Belonging. The celebration lasted until midnight. Music played from speakers someone had set up. Food appeared from grills and coolers. Laughter echoed across the Oklahoma night. Mabel moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and handshakes and stories about Caleb. Men she'd never met told her how her son had touched their lives, how he'd helped them through dark times, how he'd been the brother they never had. It was overwhelming. It was beautiful. It was exactly what she'd needed without knowing she needed it. Around 11, she slipped away from the noise. walked toward the small memorial garden that had been planted beside her house. 79 rose bushes, one for each biker she'd saved from the tornado. And in the center, a stone marker with words carved deep. Caleb Guardian Thornton, a son, a soldier, a brother, forever remembered. Mabel knelt beside the stone. "Hi, baby," she whispered. The night was quiet here, peaceful. The sounds of the party faded to a gentle hum. "I know you're watching," she said. "I know you've been watching this whole time. Probably laughing at your crazy old mom getting into trouble with a bunch of bikers." She smiled through her tears. "I understand now. Why you joined the club, why you kept it secret. You found a family here, people who loved you for who you were. I just wish you'd told me." She touched the cold stone. "But I forgive you. Of course I forgive you. How could I not? You're my son. You'll always be my son." The wind stirred, warm and gentle, like a breath on her cheek. "They kept their promise, Caleb. 20 years late, but they kept it. I'm not alone anymore. I have a new house, a new family, a whole new life. All because you thought of me even when you were facing death." Her voice broke. "I got justice for you. The man who killed you is going to prison. The story is out there. The world knows what happened. Your name is cleared. Your legacy is secure." She kissed her fingers and pressed them to the stone. "Rest now, baby. You've earned it. I'll be okay. I've got 300 brothers looking out for me now." She laughed through her tears. "Guess you knew what you were doing after all." She stayed there for a long time, talking to Caleb, telling him about everything that had happened. The tornado, the cellar, Stone and Rev and Duke, the trip to Nevada, the confrontation with Slater. Everything. When she finally stood here, knees aching from kneeling on the cold ground, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight was gone. 20 years of grief, 20 years of anger, 20 years of loneliness, gone. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but transformed into something else. Into purpose, into family, into love. Stone found her there as the first light of dawn painted the sky. "Long night," he said. "Long 20 years." Mabel turned to face him. "But it's over now, is it?" Mabel looked at her new house, at the rose garden, at the brothers still gathered in the field, some sleeping, some talking quietly, some just watching the sunrise. "No," she said, "it's not over. It's just beginning." Stone nodded. "What do you want to do now?" Mabel thought about it. For 20 years she had survived, existed, waited to die. Now she had reasons to live. "I want to help people," she said. "The way you helped me, the way Caleb spent his life helping others." "What kind of people?" "Veterans. Families who've lost someone in the war and never got the truth. People who are struggling alone because nobody told them there was family waiting." Stone was quiet for a moment. "We could do that," he said. "Set up a foundation. Use the club's resources to find people who need help." The Caleb Thornton Foundation. Mabel smiled. "He would have liked that." "Yeah," Stone smiled back. "He would have. Will you help me? I'm your son, now remember." "Of course I'll help you," Mabel laughed. "I went from 0 children to 300 overnight. That's got to be some kind of record." "Probably." They stood together watching the sun rise over the Oklahoma fields. The sky turned from gray to pink to gold. The world woke up around them fresh and new. Stone Mabel said, "Yeah, thank you. For everything, for finding me, for telling me the truth about Caleb, for giving me a reason to keep living." Stone put his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you for letting us in," he said, "for trusting us, for being exactly who you are." Mabel leaned into him. She had lost everything once. Her husband, her son, her home. But standing here surrounded by brothers, watching the sunrise over her new life, she realized something. She had also found everything. A new home, a new family, a new purpose. And the knowledge that her son, even in death, was still protecting her, still loving her, still watching over her the way he always had, the way he always would. Around noon, Mabel sat on her new porch with a cup of coffee, watching the bikers pack up their gear. Most would be heading home today, back to their lives and their chapters across the country. But they would return. They were family now. Stone stopped by to say goodbye. He had chapter business in Tulsa, he said, but he'd be back in a few days to check on her. "You sure you'll be okay here alone?" he asked. Mabel smiled. I've been alone for 22 years. I think I can handle a few days. That's not what I meant. I know. Mabel reached out and squeezed his hand. I'll be fine, Stone. Better than fine. He nodded, hesitated, then pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. Take care of yourself, Mom. You too, son. He walked to his bike, climbed on, and kicked it to life. The engine roared. He raised one hand in farewell. Then he was gone. One by one, the other bikes followed. Reverend Duke, Dustin, Garrett, all the men who had become family over the past weeks. They would be back. But for now, Mabel was alone. She sat on her porch as the last engine faded into the distance. As the dust settled on the empty road, as the silence of the Oklahoma prairie wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. But it wasn't the same silence she'd known before. Before, the silence had been lonely, empty, suffocating. Now it was peaceful, full, alive with possibility. Mabel finished her coffee and walked into her new house. The walls smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. The floors creaked in unfamiliar places. The furniture was different, donated by brothers from across the country, each piece carrying its own story. It would take time to make this house feel like home. But she had time now. Time to live. Time to help others. Time to honor her son's memory in ways that mattered. She found Caleb's letter on her kitchen table where she'd left it. Read it one more time. Your son, Caleb. Postscript. Road name guardian. Ask Reverend about it. He'll tell you the story. She hadn't asked. Not yet. But she would. She would learn everything about the son she'd lost. Every story, every memory, every moment she'd missed during the years he'd kept a secret. And then she would share those stories with the world, so that no one would ever forget Caleb Guardian Thornton, so that his legacy would live on, so that his death would have meaning. Mabel set down the letter and walked to the window. Outside, the Oklahoma sun was shining. The rose garden was blooming. The fields stretched out toward the horizon, green and gold and endless. A year ago, she had been a widow waiting to die. A month ago, she had been a woman without a home. A week ago, she had been a mother searching for justice. Now she was something else entirely. She was Mabel Thornton, mother of the Hells Angels, keeper of her son's legacy, builder of a new life from the ruins of the old. She had opened her cellar to 79 strangers and gained 300 sons in return. She had searched for truth and found family. She had lost everything and discovered that everything she needed had been waiting for her all along. Mabel looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, Caleb was watching. She was sure of it. I did it, baby, she whispered. I finally found my place in the world. The wind stirred, warm, gentle, like a hand brushing her cheek, like a son saying he was proud, like a blessing. Mabel closed her eyes and smiled. She had spent 20 years in the darkness. Now finally she was standing in the light, and she was never going back.